Welcome back everyone to part 2 of reviving the E34. So before I replace the fuel pump and do a full service, I wanted to check if the engine even runs. So I sprayed some brake cleaner into the intake and luckily it fired right up. Maybe you noticed in the last video that the ABS light stayed on. With an ABS fault, the car won't pass inspection here in Germany, so that was the first thing I wanted to fix. And the problem was quickly found. The ABS control unit was literally sitting in water. Luckily I found a used one for cheap. While I was at it, I also cleaned the ECU with some isopropyl alcohol. At the top of my to-do list, of course, was the most important thing on these old BMW engines, the thermostat and water pump. So first I removed the viscous fan. Then I moved onto the pulley. Pro tip, leave the belt on while loosening bolts. It was pretty stuck, this water pump of course, so I had to give it a few taps with a hammer and use a screwdriver to pry it out. I would not recommend this to anyone, because you can also screw bolts into the threaded holes on the pump to push it out of the hole. As you can see, the coolant actually looked pretty good. I think the car was taken off the road after getting a full service. Otherwise I cannot explain this to myself. Here you can see the new and old water pump side by side. Next up, the thermostat housing. The housing came off easily, but I had to pry out the thermostat with a screwdriver. And it still looks fine, but hey, once it's out, it's not going back in. I then cleaned all the sealing surfaces and gave them a light sanding so everything seals properly. Now for my special technique for flushing the cooling system. I poured water into the hose that leads from the thermostat into the engine, so that the water came out of the other end. Since the fuel pump was completely shot, I also had to replace the fuel filter. The bolts on that one weren't so easy to loosen.
Ja. Gott, ist das fest.
When working on the pump and filter, make sure you know which line is feed and which is return, and pay attention to the direction arrow on the fuel filter. It shows you in which way you have to install it. Now for the fuel pump install, and let me tell you, this part took longer than the entire service. Getting that thing in place is a nightmare. I eventually gave up on filming that part entirely, but hey, it worked out at the end. And now the moment we've all been waiting for, the first start. And it fired right up and immediately died again. So what was the problem? A hose from the intake boot to the idle control valve was completely disconnected. So the broken hose I circled in yellow, and this hose, it leads to the idle control valve that I circled in red. So the engine can't idle on its own, but with a bit of throttle I managed to keep it alive. Enough to take it for a quick spin. The brakes were absolutely terrible, but I was blown away by how good the car drives. I was also really surprised there were no issues with the clutch or gearbox. But with brakes like that, it's honestly too dangerous. So I quickly parked it again, or rather, it stalled again at idle. To finish off, here's a quick clip of the engine running after I professionally fixed the broken hose with some tape. And an M50 just sounds amazing. Do it again. So next up will be the brakes, and finally we will take a look underneath the car. Please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next part, and I really appreciate a like and comment. See you in the next one. Bye.